Hey, and welcome back. So this week on my Instagram, I've been publishing content inspired by this brilliant book here, Decoded by Phil Barden. The subtitle is The Science Behind Why We Buy, and it's a fascinating read that delves into behavioural psychology. And what it does is demonstrate that most of the time when we're deciding, we don't use logic to make decisions. Now, you might think that that doesn't make sense, that the way that we make decisions must be dictated by logic and reason. And before I took a deep dive into the area of persuasion, that's what I thought too. And I believe that humans are rational beings that occasionally get irrational. And boy, was I wrong. The truth is that we are irrational the vast majority of the time. And what do I mean by that? Well, basically, the way that we make decisions isn't how you might imagine. We don't weigh up options, we don't critique them and then decide based on logic. That's not how it happens. What happens is we tend to make decisions unconsciously, then use logic to justify those decisions to ourselves after the fact, to make sense of an unconscious choice. So rather than using exact calculations, our brain uses mental shortcuts, which happen automatically, rather than the other method of thinking we have, which is slow and deliberate. Now, Barden refers to these two different ways of thinking as the autopilot and the pilot. And like I said, most decisions are made by the autopilot. So given that this is true, why is it important to you? I know that most people watching this will either be small business owners or freelancers. So why is it important that you understand the differences between the autopilot and the pilot in this area of behavioural psychology? Well, simply, you're selling to human beings, and no matter who we are and no matter who we want to buy from us, the mechanics that dictate our decisions are the same. So understanding those mechanics and how you can influence them is a big deal if you want a sustainable business, if you want to grow, get more sales, which I think is safe to say most of us want that. So like I said, we have two modes of thinking. The autopilot works quickly, it's intuitive, it's impulsive, and it's error prone. And the pilot is slow and deliberate and effortful. So the autopilot is in charge most of the time. And in fact, an article on the Harvard Business Review said that up to 95% of our buying decisions are made by the autopilot without us actually being conscious of them. And this is because we expend less energy in this mode. It's called cognitive ease. And because it's fast and automatic, we have no control over it. It just kicks in and it does its thing. While the pilot is effortful and deliberate, this creates cognitive strain, so we use it only sparingly. Now, the mental shortcuts that the autopilot uses to decide are what we call in behavioural economics biases and heuristics. And a couple of common ones that you've probably heard of are confirmation bias and price anchoring. But what we're going to do now is look at a couple of ways that we can use principles ethically to influence our people's buying decisions in our favour, and given that we understand now that the autopilot is in the driving seat, so what we need to do first is help the autopilot to feel familiar with us. If there's a sense of familiarity with our brand, we're more likely to be preferred because we're safe and we'll feel trusted, and we can't have sale without trust. So what we do is draw upon the mere exposure effect. This is a principle that states that merely being exposed to our brand on a regular basis can lead to a feeling of preference. There doesn't even need to be any direct interaction, just some exposure on some level. For example, if our logo or a distinctive brand asset is seen in the peripheral vision of our prospect. This is one of the reasons why brands invest so much in brand building activities and why things such as outdoor, TV, radio advertising are still effective in this sense. It's because of how they work. They're there in the background and our autopilot is processing this without us knowing. Now, it's likely that you don't have a budget for TV or radio advertising, and you don't need to. But what you do need to do is show up on a regular basis in front of your audience. But that's not to say it's just as simple as posting every day on social media, although there is a benefit to that. It has to be about these assets being distinctive so they're immediately recognizable as being you. Because all of these interactions will compound over time. And if your content, ads, images can't be identified from being your brand, what you do is water down that effect. But if you get it right, you'll feel familiar and safe, and you'll increase your chances of being preferred in buying situations. So next, what we're going to do is look at a principle that actually works quite well with the mere exposure effect. Like I said, it's no good to simply churn out content. It has to be distinctive, and it has to be distinctively you. And one way to get there is to use what's known as the von Restorf effect. The von Restorf effect is all about being memorable by booking category conventions, and states that given the number of different stimuli, the stimulus that's most different will stand out and is more likely to be remembered. So it's easy to fall into the trap of mimicking what others in our category are doing in terms of content, design, tone, videos, etc. And there is a logic to that. It's safe, and we feel that we probably won't offend anybody or put people off. But the thing is, we're actually working against ourselves when we play too safe and follow category conventions too closely. So I'm not necessarily saying you've got to be completely wild, although there could be merit to that. You know, look at the Cybertruck by Tesla. Put it next to 10 other trucks in the category and your eye is immediately drawn to it. If later you're asked to recall a vehicle from the lineup, what vehicle do you think will automatically come to mind? It's going to be the Cybertruck. Now, the ways that you can use the von Restorf effect in your marketing are many. You could have a logo that's designed to stand out from your competition and alternatives, and distinctive brand assets that are different in that sense too. If in your category the norm is to have an animated explainer, for example, as we see so often in SaaS brands, you go for something handheld and live action. If the tone of your industry is dry, like accounting, for example, you use humour in your messaging and your content. And it could be in the design of your visuals or on your website. Of course, exactly how you use the mere exposure and von Restorf effects are going to be contextual to you. So I can't give you specific answers to your company here. But what I hope is that this video switched on some lights for you, and you can look across your marketing, across your category, and be deliberate in choices that you're making that will help you stand out and feel familiar to your audience. Human behaviour has evolved over thousands of years, so the truth behind the autopilot and the pilot are not fads. They're literally hardwired into the way that we work. The areas of persuasion and behavioural economics are areas I'm utterly fascinated by, and I see as very, very powerful. So I hope that this has been helpful and useful to you. And remember, as Uncle Ben says, with great power comes great responsibility. Thanks for watching.